I've been married for only a year. This year, my husband and I had been leading a seemingly decent life. However, in the last months, my husband faced the intense pressure of getting a promotion at work. The stress seemed to weigh him down, and troubles began to multiply like never before. But he also mentioned that Mr. Lin in their company held a favorable opinion of him. When it came to this Mr. Lin, I truly disliked him. Lin was the quintessential overweight and greasy man, with a shiny bald patch on his head that made him look even more unappealing. My husband had invited Mr. Lin to dinner before, and I had grudgingly gone along. Mr. Lin's lecherous gaze at me made me feel extremely uncomfortable. It was as if his eyes were undressing me, sending shivers down my spine. Dear, you'll send some gifts to Mr. Lin later. Otherwise, in this matter, I really have no confidence at all. Please help me. My husband pleaded with a desperate look in his eyes. Initially, I was strongly reluctant, remembering how Mr. Lin looked at me during our previous encounters. A wave of disgust washed over me, but because of my husband's persistent persuasion, using all kinds of reasons and assurances, I tried to convince myself. Eventually, I gave in and agreed to my husband's request. Thinking about it, my husband had indeed sacrificed a lot for this family, and I was just going to give a gift. It was no big deal. Then, at my husband's insistence, I changed into a short black skirt that barely covered my thighs and black silk stockings that clung tightly to my legs. I stepped out in high heels that made clicking sounds with each step. My husband drove me to the luxurious hotel where Mr. Lin was staying. If your wife takes a sip of water, you can go up. After my husband finished speaking, he hurriedly bought the juice for me in advance and handed it to me with an anxious expression. I took a big gulp without thinking much and walked into the elevator, carrying the elaborately prepared gift. Standing at the door of Mr. Lin's room, my heart was a chaotic mess, and my eyes turned red from anxiety and fear. In the end, for my husband's promotion, I was willing to sacrifice myself. Just as I took a deep breath and was about to ring the doorbell, the door inside opened with a sudden creak. "Satsuki, you're finally here. Come in." Mr. Lin, who opened the door for me, was wearing a loose bathrobe that exposed his hairy chest. When he saw me, his eyes shone with a predatory glint. I walked in with red eyes, my steps hesitant and fearful. It was a lavish suite inside, and the room was so spacious that it felt overwhelming. After I put down my bag, I changed into the provided slippers and walked in. But the next second, I was stunned and petrified. There were actually 5 or 6 middle-aged men in bathrobes standing in the room, their eyes lit up like hungry wolves spotting their prey. "Mr. Lin, what do you mean by this?" I instinctively backed away in terror, my heart pounding wildly, attempting to run away. "Zhao Yu, didn't your husband tell you? Let you come over and accompany Mr. Lin." "But we are all surnamed Lin. We are all Mr. Lin." Seeing this, Mr. Lin and the few behind him, those fat and big-eared men, laughed wickedly, their laughter echoing through the room, sending chills down my spine. At this point, I wanted to escape but found myself feeling strangely weak. My legs were like lead, and my head started to spin. I suddenly realized that the bottle of juice my husband just gave me to drink seemed to have a problem. I quickly covered my forehead with my hand and then shook my head frantically, trying to clear my foggy mind. At the same time, I shouted at them with all my strength, "Don't come here. Come any closer, and I'll call the police." My body trembled uncontrollably, but at this time, I was still somewhat conscious and managed to stumble towards the door while staggering. I tripped over my back and was about to rush out of the hotel, but when I slammed the door, I discovered to my horror that there was no way to pull it open. "Zhao Yu, what are you doing here? Didn't you agree to your husband's request to come and accompany me? Why do you want to run so fast? Besides, do you think you can run now?" The bold Mr. Lin smiled evilly, his eyes filled with malice. At this point, he had already walked out of the inner room, and that look was completely like he wanted to devour me whole. "If you don't stay away, I'll call the police." I panicked and frantically searched for my phone inside my bag while sternly warning Mr. Lin, my voice cracking with fear. "Zhao Yu, stop pretending. Your husband asked me to do this. Are you really willing to make such a sacrifice for such a man?" Mr. Lin's words suddenly woke me up like a bolt of lightning. It was clear that he seemed to know about my husband and what kind of person he was behind the scenes, or Mr. Lin had seen through my husband's true nature. Otherwise, why would he say that? And it was obvious that my husband was getting promoted for himself at the expense of me with his leader, and for his ends, he would do anything. Deliberately giving me the questionable juice, the thought of this completely shattered my heart. "Okay, Zhao Yu, stop pretending. Have fun with us, Mr. Lin. Tomorrow your husband will be the director. Why don't you do it?" At this time, Mr. Lin saw me sitting on the ground limply, and the whole person laughed even more presumptuously, his laughter grating on my ears. And the other fat-headed, big-eared man behind him all came over with lust-filled eyes fixed on me. I was on the verge of collapse at the moment I saw them approaching me step by step. Just at a critical moment, the door was suddenly pushed open with a forceful shove. At this moment, a very well-dressed and stunningly beautiful woman walked in. Her every movement exuded elegance and authority. After she came in, she directly ordered Mr. Lin and the other man in a cold and commanding tone, "You can withdraw." The beauty just made a simple gesture, and this Mr. Lin immediately showed respectful expressions and quickly evacuated the room like obedient puppies. After seeing them all leave this suite, I finally breathed a sigh of relief, but my heart was still pounding furiously. "Who are you?" But at this moment, when I saw this beautiful woman in front of me, I still asked suspiciously, my voice shaky. After all, in my impression, I had never seen this Miss Zhang. "I am Mr. Qing's assistant, Zhao Qing. Those people just now were actually invited by Mr. Qing. They did this to test your husband's character, so I believe you should now have a new understanding of your husband," Zhao Qing said calmly. Zhao Qing's words immediately sent shockwaves through me, leaving me stunned and speechless. Zhao Qing also directly told me that my husband actually had a new lover outside. She produced a stack of photos that seemed to burn my eyes. Looking at the various intimate poses of my husband and another woman in the photos, their smiles and embraces, I felt as if my world had collapsed. I finally saw my husband for who he truly was. When I got back, I threw the damning evidence in my husband's face with all my might. No matter how desperately he begged me, pleaded with tears in his eyes, I remained resolute. I decided to divorce and filed for divorce directly, without a moment's hesitation. Soon, the court granted my request for divorce, and it felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. On the day I received my divorce certificate, Zhao King drove off in front of me in a sleek car. She said that Mr. King wanted to see me. The moment I saw Mr. King, I was stunned. This was not the little security guard I saw when I came to my husband's company before. Mr. King smiled slightly, wearing a perfectly tailored gray suit that accentuated his broad shoulders and tall figure. A very gentlemanly man walked over. "Hello, Satsuki. Let's get acquainted again. My name is King Fei. It's you, aren't you, that little security guard?" Seeing King Fei, who now exuded confidence and charm, I was shocked beyond measure. When you first met, Mr. King was experiencing the daily life of a security guard. Zhao King, the assistant next to her, hurriedly smiled and explained. It also made me extremely embarrassed because I really thought that day that King Fei was their company's ordinary little security guard. That's why I had been bothering him with my complaints and concerns, but his attitude at that time was really kind and patient. That's when I was very impressed with King Fei. When King Fei learned that I was already married, he began to pay attention to me silently from afar. It's just that I never thought later that my husband was actually two-timing. Married to me, he still had relationships with other women, so King Fei secretly kept investigating him, going through great lengths to gather a lot of solid evidence. King Fei, who was genuinely worried about me in his heart, couldn't sit still when he saw the extent of my husband's deception. That's why he deliberately orchestrated such a dramatic scene to expose this scumbag. After hearing this, my eyes were already red, filled with a mixture of gratitude and sadness. "Miss Satsuki, can you give me a chance? Let's be friends." King Fei politely invited me to get in the car, his eyes filled with sincerity and hope. It was our first date, but we seemed to have known each other for thousands of years, and the tacit understanding between us was palpable. Later, under King Fei's passionate and relentless pursuit, filled with sweet gestures and heartfelt promises, I married King Fei. Since then, I have lived a blissful and happy life of my own.